My ledger said the reserve tanks were empty, but my gauge sheets did not. The system demanded a clean balance, and my superiors preferred loss to questions. I watched the locked gate log fill with quiet entries that had no vouchers attached. If I wrote the truth in ink, I knew what it would cost me. November 1944, Northern France and Belgium. Allied forces have pushed far beyond Normandy. The front moves on wheels and track. Fuel consumption rises with every mile. Behind the armies, supply organisations rebuild while still running. In the European theatre of operations, petroleum, oil and lubricants are Class 3. Fuel is a daily limit on movement. It governs how far formations can patrol, redeploy and exploit. By autumn 1944, the question is not only how much fuel exists, it is how quickly it can be received, received, stored and moved inland, and issued. The official logistical history notes that improvement in POL supply had to wait on better distribution, with recovery pushed into November, and that intake and movement improved as additional ports and routes came into use. WWII. Most fuel arrives in bulk. Tankers feed port storage, pumps send it onward into railcars and pipelines, trucks draw from decanting points and depot tank farms. Each handoff adds friction. Each handoff creates a point where losses can occur. Some losses are expected. Spillage, imperfect drainage, measurement differences from temperature and technique. Yet loss can also be administrative. A number can be misplaced, a form can arrive late, a voucher can be written to hide what happened. The same logistical record shows how vulnerable the system was to timing. Bulk trains could arrive unpredictably, dispensing capacity could lag. Tank cars, always scarce, could be immobilized when a railhead was not ready. Biblio.org. That pressure shapes accounting. The stock record must chase events. It must still be accurate. It must describe reality closely enough for planners to allocate fuel without guesswork. This story stays inside that accounting work. It is about fuel ledgers and tank gauges. It isn't about the distance between paper and steel. It is about what happens when that distance is ignored. In late 1944, large forward depots support the armies. The official history describes major bulk storage and depots such as those at Liège and near Verdun, and the continuing effort to improve decanting and distribution as the lines of communication lengthened and shifted. Biblio.org. A depot is a system, not a single tank. It has storage tanks, valves, pumps, pipelines and gauge hatches. It also has fences, guard posts and locked gates. Access is mapped. Some areas are daily workspaces, others are held as reserve. Reserve stock is meant to exist quietly. It is a promise against interruption. It is also a temptation when fuel is short. Wartime supply histories acknowledge that pilferage was a recurring depot problem, including at major installations such as the Liverpool depot in the early months, biblio.org. Technical guidance on container use also notes that when petroleum is scarce, pilferage becomes serious, and that smaller containers like 5-gallon cans can suffer large losses because one person can carry them away. Museum.army.mil. Theft does not require drama, and it can be gradual. It can be small amounts repeated. It can be a line on a form altered under pressure. It can be a can that never returns to the stack. The first people to see the pattern are often not commanders. They are the ones who post receipts. They reconcile issue vouchers. They close the day's balance. They know what normal numbers look like. On a damp morning in November, a fuel accounting clerk works in an advanced section depot office. The air smells of wet wool, ink, and old paper. A stove warms one side of the room and leaves the other cold. Forms lie in piles. Carbon sheets curl at the edges. A hand-cranked adding machine sits beside a stamp pad. A wall map is pinned with routes and depot codes. The clerk's task is not to improvise, it is to document. Every delivery has a receiving report, every issue has a voucher, and every tank has a level report. Each day ends with a balance that must be defensible. The depot runs in shifts. Trucks arrive in lines. Pump operators shout over engines. Hoses are coupled. Valves are opened. Flow is measured as well as equipment allows. Then the movement is turned into numbers. When fuel arrives by rail, the chain begins with the siding. Sometimes notice comes late. Sometimes it does not come at all. The official history gives an example from this period in which 109 tank cars arrived at a railhead without warning, and limited dispensing capacity left cars immobilized. a biblioorgabius. In such conditions, accounting is always at risk of lag. A receipt can sit unposted while the fuel itself is already being moved. A depot can look empty in the books while full on the ground, or the reverse. The clerk receives bundles of paperwork from the receiving point. He confirms car numbers and product codes. He compares signatures and dates. He checks whether gauge readings were taken before and after transfer. He looks for consistent units of measure. He scans for corrections that were not initialed. Then he posts the receipt to the stock record. That record is not merely a count, it is classification. Motor gasoline, diesel, kerosene, aviation grades, and lubricants must not be mixed. Some products move under tighter controls. Aviation grades in particular often sit behind additional restrictions. This depot has several tank groups. Most are in regular rotation. One group lies behind a second fence line. The gate is kept locked. The key is controlled. The area holds reserve stock. It is not used for routine truck issues. And on the stock record, the locked group is only a line, a tank designation, a balance. If the line is wrong, the tank itself does not care. Steel holds what it holds. Each day the clerk reconciles books and tank reports. The tank farm submits level sheets. Gauge readers record heights. Supervisors initial summaries. These numbers are not perfect. They are still the depot's pulse. At first, mismatches are small. A few hundred gallons, a delayed posting, a ticket misfiled. The clerk notes them and expects correction. Then a larger contradiction appears. It is not depot-wide. It concentrates in one line. It sits where the locked group should be. The ledger shows the locked group as empty. It shows the tanks drained weeks earlier. It shows the last transfer posted. It shows no receipts afterward. The balance reads 0. Yet the tank report says otherwise. Not a trace, not a residue. A level that translates into many thousands of gallons. Enough to move vehicles and generators through a long night. The clerk does what the job requires. He does not accuse, he verifies. He pulls the prior postings, he checks receipt files and issue vouchers, he reviews adjustment forms, he asks whether the locked group was reclassified. He looks for transfers into it that were posted somewhere else. Nothing matches. The book remains at 0. The gauge sheets still show stock. In a depot office, this is quiet risk. If this clerk is wrong, he has challenged routine. If he is right, he has found a breach in accountability. Either outcome matters. He walks to the tank farm office. He requests the gauge sheets and conversion tables. He asks who read the reserve tanks. Then he requests a second reading with a witness. He wants the time and initials on the repeat measurement. The second reading matches the first. The fuel is there. Now the problem is not rounding. It is a contradiction between official record and physical reality. A false 0 can create a false shortage. It can misdirect transport. It can distort requisitions. It can alter the theatre's picture at a time when reserves and reaction times already strain operations. A biblioorg. If someone benefits from that false picture, correcting it becomes more than bookkeeping. It becomes an inquiry. Back at his desk, the clerk reconstructs the timeline. He writes the last date when the locked group was shown as full in the books. He notes the date when it became empty on paper. He lists every form in between. Then he copies every signature that touches the line. A pattern forms. The locked group was emptied by a transfer. The paperwork claims the fuel moved to an active tanker group. The receiving group shows an increase. But the increase is smaller than the supposed transfer. The missing amount is covered by an operational loss entry. The entry is signed. It offers no detail beyond the word loss. Loss entries can be honest. A hose leak, a spill, a tank car imperfectly drained. But magnitude matters. The clerk compares this loss to other loss entries. He sees spikes around certain shifts. He notices clustering around certain signatures. He notes totals that sit just under thresholds that trigger higher review. He requests the depot security log. He asks for the gate log for the reserve area. He asks for the list of authorized key holders. Said he checks whether any maintenance work required entry. The gate log shows routine guard checks. It also shows one night entry marked only as inspection. A time is given, a name is listed, a vehicle is noted, no cargo entry appears. The clerk asks the guard sergeant whether this is normal. Inspection is normal. Unscheduled truck entry is not meant to be normal. Not without dispatch orders, not without fuel paperwork. Now there are two facts that refuse to fit together. a tank that is physically full, a ledger line that declares it empty, and a gate entry that suggests access without corresponding issue vouchers. In a well-staffed system, escalation would be immediate. In a strained wartime depot, escalation competes with survival. People are short of sleep. They are criticised for delay. They are praised for throughput. A caution has fewer rewards. Fuel accounting cannot be only throughput. It must be trusted. A theatre that cannot trust stock records cannot plan distribution. A depot that cannot defend its balances invites external control. External control is seldom efficient. The clerk drafts a discrepancy report. The language is careful. No accusations, only facts. Book balance, 0. Tankendutzung, measurement. Substantial stock. Forms, no reconciliation, Ziehen, loss. Entry, unusually large. Gate log, anomaly. He routes the packet to his immediate supervisor. He asks for a receipt. The supervisor reads without enthusiasm. There is talk of late postings, there is talk of war conditions, there is a tired appeal to paper problems. Still, the amount is too large to dismiss. The reserve gate detail is too specific. The report is forwarded upward. That is how a discrepancy becomes a case. Not by drama, by procedure. A system survives only if contradictions are resolved. The depot keeps operating, fuel keeps moving, but a small group begins rechecking. They arrive as auditors, inspectors, staff officers. They ask for the same records, then they ask for more. They request daily tank inventories. They examine meter calibration notes. They ask for movement orders authorizing transfers. They ask how often bulk trains arrive without warning. The official history emphasizes the desire for advance information on shipments and the strain caused by unpredictable arrivals. ibiblio.org. They ask about containers. They ask whether 5-gallon cans are being used heavily. They ask whether can shortages forced improvisation. The historical record describes how policies were adjusted to reduce jerrycan turnaround time and ease can shortages, and how earlier efforts to have armies fill their own cans were not entirely successful. ibiblio.org. Improvisation creates openings. When procedure bends to keep fuel flowing, controls can loosen. That does not mean dishonesty is inevitable. It means the margin for it grows. The auditors visit the reserve area. They walk the fence line. They test the lock. They ask how keys are issued. They examine tank ladders and gauge hatches. They look for signs of recent transfer activity. They compare the physical condition to the story told by the books. If tanks were drained, there should be evidence of draining. Work orders, transfer traces, hose wear, documented receipts and issues, a consistent chain instead. The reserve tanks look maintained. They look like protected stock. They do not look like emptied vessels. Back in the office, the auditors review the alleged transfer documentation again. It is thin. Signatures repeat. Supporting detail is missing. They compare the receiving tank group's issue pattern to what it should show. The numbers still do not meet. The question becomes practical. How could paper claim movement that the totals cannot support? How could a reserve be empty while gauges insist otherwise? Paperwork in wartime moves fast and breaks easily. Forms are lost. Carbon copies are illegible. Units depart before signatures are complete. Errors happen, yet errors have a pattern. They scatter. They cut both directions. They rarely respect thresholds. Fraud has a different shape. It clusters. It prefers ambiguity. Yet it hides in routine. It uses the word loss as cover. The auditors order a full physical inventory. Every tank is gauged. Every product line is counted. Every ledger line is matched to a physical reading. They also reconcile from the ground up. Start with physical stock. Work backwards to receipts and issues. It takes time. Time is scarce. But a depot that cannot account for fuel can paralyze operations elsewhere. A false shortage can trigger unnecessary emergency shipments. A hidden surplus can sit behind a lock while another sector runs short. The inventory confirms the clerk's finding. The reserve tanks contain real stock, not a measurement artifact, not a clerical echo, steel and fuel present on the ground. The inventory also finds deficits elsewhere, not everywhere, not enough to balance cleanly against the reserve surplus, but enough to show postings were used to smooth the books. Several explanations are plausible. A reserve tank group can be used as a buffer when rail deliveries surge and dispensing capacity is strained. The historical record shows that dispensing limitations could immobilize tank cars and intensify pressure to clear sidings, ebiblio.org. In that pressure, fuel can be pumped wherever there is space. Paperwork can be reconstructed later. A reconstruction that is never corrected becomes a durable falsehood. Another explanation is diversion. Fuel issued without vouchers, fuel siphoned into unauthorized vehicles, fuel traded for scarce goods, fuel entering informal markets. Pilferage was recognized as a real depot risk, and small container vulnerability was explicitly noted in technical discussions. ebiblio.org. A third explanation is concealment of reserve stock. Local leaders sometimes fear reallocation from above. They keep insurance by hiding holdings in reports. That motive can exist without personal profit. It still distorts the theatre's picture. To sort this, the auditors look for intent indicators, repeated gate entries, vehicle numbers, guard statements, pump operator recollections, motor pool logs. They treat each as partial, then compare across sources. Witnesses are cautious. Few want to accuse others in wartime. Yet a guard recalls unusual night movement. A pump operator recalls being told to stand aside during a special transfer. A motor pool worker recalls a truck returning with a strong fuel smell despite having no issue voucher attached. None is decisive alone. Together they narrow possibilities. Then a technical specialist is consulted. He reviews measurement practice, transfer procedure, and tank farm condition. Field guidance for the petroleum depots emphasizes inspection and monitoring of tanks and pipelines, and warns that storage problems require immediate action, reflecting how closely physical integrity and accountable operation were linked. Accountability depends on physical reality. If a tank leaks, fuel is lost. If a tank is full but unrecorded, truth is lost. Both matter to operations. Key control is examined in detail. Who had access, how keys were signed out, whether duplicate keys existed, whether the gate could be opened without a log entry. Wartime security is layered but not perfect. Insiders can exploit gaps. Auditors therefore treat security logs as evidence, not certainty. And a narrow reconstruction becomes the turning point. On the day the paperwork claims the reserve tanks were drained, a bulk train arrived late. Dispensing capacity was strained. Clearing the siding was urgent. In that moment, fuel may have been pumped into reserve storage to keep the depot from choking. That physical act is plausible. What is not explained is why the record later insisted the reserve was empty. The auditors search the days that follow. They find gaps in receiving reports. They find references to receipts that are not filed. They find carbon layers that do not match, suggesting late rewriting. Such details do not prove motive. They do show that the document chain was disturbed. They compare the depot's own stock record to the report sent upward. For several weeks, for severals, the depot reported lower holdings than the physical inventory now shows it held. That means the theatre saw a distorted picture at a time when POL distribution and reserves were already a major concern. Biblio.org. The auditors recommend immediate correction of stock records. They also recommend tightened access control for reserve areas. Documented key issue: two-person gauging for reserve tanks. Loss entries above set amounts requiring justification and review. This is not theatre-changing innovation. It is the grammar of internal control. Depot leadership resists at first. Workload is heavy, staff is thin, throughput is demanded. Yet auditors reply in the same calm tone. Speed without records creates future delay. A depot under suspicion slows itself. A depot that cannot explain balances loses autonomy. Either the risk becomes personal for the clerk who first raised the issue. Not danger at the fence, reputation in the office. A clerk who is seen as troublesome can be sidelined. A clerk who is seen as precise can be kept in place. The outcome depends on leadership. In this case, the clerk's report is absorbed into the audit file. His name is not made a public example. That is typical. Logistics work often disappears into administrative records. What remains is the correction. The depot's ledger is adjusted. Balances change. Reported holdings rise suddenly. To outsiders, it looks like fuel appeared. To those inside, it looks like paper finally acknowledged steel. Consequences are quiet. No public spectacle appears in the official narrative. Procedures tighten. Some personnel are reassigned. Some are removed from sensitive duties. The depot continues. It also operates differently afterward. Reserve tanks are counted daily. Gate logs are matched to tank sheets. Issues from reserve storage require higher signatures. Receipts are posted without delay. Loss entries require explanation. Container accountability is tightened as well. If 5-gallon cans are used, inventories are kept. Return rates are tracked. Units are pressed to return empties. The historical record describes how handling policies shifted to reduce turnaround time and relieve shortages. ibiblio.org. As winter deepens, the operational situation changes again. On December 16, 1944, the German counteroffensive begins in the Ardennes. The official history describes how the offensive threatened POL installations, forced evacuation of major dumps, and disrupted forward shipments, and even as some attacks on key POL points caused limited damage. ibiblio.org had disruption strains records again. Stocks are moved quickly, issues surge, evacuation orders override routine. In such moments, a depot can lose track of its own truth. Here, the earlier discrepancy leaves a practical lesson. During evacuation, clerks insist on witness signatures. Supervisors demand clear movement documentation. Reserve tanks are treated as assets that must be recorded, not merely hidden behind locks. If fuel is moved fast, the depot must know what it moved. After winter, the supply system strengthens. Ports and inland routes expand, reserves rise. The official history notes the recovery of reserves and the added flexibility gained as intake capacity and distribution improved, including with the opening of Antwerp. Tell ibiblio.org, greater volume does not erase risk. It can conceal small diversions more easily. It can also multiply paperwork errors. The same habits remain essential. Measure, record, reconcile, question contradictions. The fuel accounting clerk's discovery is not a legend. It is a case study in logistics. Supply is not only production and transport, it is also record. When record and reality diverge, a war machine loses part of its sight. Depot pilferage was recognized as a real problem in wartime operations, and container vulnerability was explicitly noted. Those facts do not accuse every worker. They explain why accounting mattered. ibiblio.org. 2. In one locked depot, the tanks were not truly empty. Only the paper was. That difference could create false shortages and false requests, and it could conceal real stock at the wrong time. If you want more documented stories about overlooked workers and systems that kept armies moving, subscribe and stay with the series.